emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 038.JE1543, certificate number 26351, the Amargosa Opera House.
This opera house, on the outskirts of Death Valley, this anomalous ballet theater, is the offspring of a love affair between a woman and an old empty building in the desert. For once upon a time, a renowned ballerina named Marta Beckett was driving through California with her husband when she encountered the rest of her life. It was she who retired from touring to repair a roof and to paint a mural and to make a dream come true. And that dream lives to this day. And curtain is 8:15 sharp, and the dance in full costume with full scenery will go on whether you are there or not, whether anyone is there or not.
Do you know what borax is?
I have a vague idea that it's delivered by mules.
Oh, interesting.
Do you remember their 40 mule team?
The 20 mule team.
20, is it 20?
20 mules.
I think we just had borax in my house that was twice as good.
And what did 40 mule borax, the concentrated version. What did borax do? Do you remember?
It's some kind of, it's made of lye or something, or boric. It's some kind of, is it laundry related?
Yes.
Does it wash clothes or bleach clothes or something?
Yes.
It's, but why is it, it's not a detergent? Why are people putting borac acid and some kind of alkali on their clothes?
Why indeed? Borax is actually...
We may never know the answer to this mystery. If you haven't Googled it.
Oh, believe me, I've Googled it.
You know how borax works.
You know, you tend to do all the math and chemistry shows, but I've decided not anymore. I'm going to do all the chemistry shows, and I'm just going to talk about the atomic table from here on out.
You're going to be Mr. Borax.
No, in fact, there's already a Mr. Borax, my friend.
What?
A Mr. Borax by the name of Francis Borax Smith, who was known as Mr. Borax throughout the 19th century.
This show is already putting the bore back in borax.
Borax is kind of a crazy miracle mineral. It actually naturally appears, it's not lye, it naturally appears as borax.
Like that's actually the chemical name. It's not just a trade name. Okay.
Yes. And it's, there is an element within borax, boron, which can be distilled out of borax.
One would assume.
But borax is a strange and useful salt that's employed in a lot of applications, both industrial and commercial.
To this day, like, does my detergent at home have borax in it?
Not unless it says so.
Okay.
Borax is an alkaline deposit that forms in kind of like playas, like inland seas that are evaporative.
Some kind of dry seabed.
Yeah, they're called endahaic basins, terminal basins, where it rains and it becomes a marsh, and then it evaporates, and what's left behind is often borax. And you can think of it as you see them around hot springs. They're crystalline deposits that were known back into sort of Ming Dynasty China and earlier, first used as a glaze for pottery.
Oh.
Or first kind of introduced to the West as
first used as a glaze for donuts, but then that guy died immediately.
Delicious.
And thereafter used as a glaze for pottery.
Used for a glaze for pottery, and they were a thing that had kind of been it's a crystal, so they've been known since prehistoric times, but there wasn't really it wasn't discovered their utility for many centuries, and then little by little, borax and boron, like so much.
This is one of your weird cobalt shows. I just realized this show is all going to be about cornering the market on boron. Buy boron.
Buy boron now. People started to see, that it could, that it had a multiplicity of uses. It's not one specific. It's not like a salt that's good for one thing. It's good for
not like, I don't know, what's this crappy salt that's only good for one thing. But this salt can do it all.
It's a salt that can do it all. It was only recognized as the element, the component of boron. The component of borax, the element boron, was only identified in the 19th century, I guess.
It's one of the lighter elements, right?
It's very light. It's got an atomic number of 5.
I can only think of 4 elements lighter than that.
Go ahead. Can you name them?
Hydrogen.
Go.
Helium.
Sure.
Lithium.
Okay.
And almost certainly beryllium. Is that
beryllium.
Right? I'm going to look pretty dumb
Where does oxygen fall in this?
If it's 5, oxygen is heavier than boron. Am I right? Check my work.
Let's see here. Is it possible that oxygen can be heavier than boron? We've got hydrogen, helium, we've got lithium, beryllium, and boron.
There we go.
Wow, oxygen has an atomic number of 8.
I should go on Jeopardy.
You really should. Carbon is 6.
The rest of the show should just be us naming elements that are heavier than boron and then saying by how much.
And then 7 is nitrogen.
You know what else is heavier?
What?
Everything.
Whoa.
In the universe.
Whoa.
Thulium, polonium.
That's cool.
Molybdenum, so much heavier.
That's cool, bro. Wow, okay. Tell me, what's the atomic number of iron? Come on.
I have no idea.
Guess. Throw out a guess.
I'm going to be off by like a factor of 2.
No, let's see.
Iron is number...
Yeah.
44.
No.
29.
You've gone over. 29 is a lot closer. It's 26.
I said factor of 2.
I thought actually an interesting thing to do this winter would be to memorize the atomic table. I know there's so many future links that have it memorized like their times table, and they're just really rolling their eyes at us right now.
I feel like it would have to be a nuclear winter for me to find that interesting.
You don't think that would be interesting? Just sit and memorize the atomic table. Why wouldn't you?
I have a neighbor kid, he's always been kind of a geeky kid. He's currently studying jazz in upstate New York. And he was fascinated with the periodic table as a youngster and wanted to own every element. He was...
Oh, how cool.
And have I talked about this on the show? Because he didn't have americium and it was killing him.
Yeah.
But his grandma had said that, hey, when my smoke detector finally gives up the ghost, you can have all the used americium from my smoke detector. And she'll probably die in a fire because of that. But she was willing to give her grandkid.
So many dead fire beepers. I have like 5 in my garage.
Where were you a couple years ago when this kid was little and americium hungry?
I know. I mean, it seems like he could be stealing catalytic converters out of old cars just as easily.
But yeah, he was accumulating his own periodic table. I think he wanted to display them in kind of Mendelevian order.
Oh, wouldn't that be awesome? But I mean, some of those are going to be very radioactive, and some of them they won't exist for more than a couple of seconds.
Well, I mean, that's true of any good hobby.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true.
Like the pleasure from almost anything only lasts for a couple of seconds, whether it's a perfectly mint copy of some comic book your daughter's ripping up or a sex act.
He's gonna have a tiny invisible little like remnant of what was once Einsteinium.
He'll be able to draw a chalk circle on his wall. Einsteinium was here.
It was here. Francis Borax Smith was an American success story. He was out west prospecting working initially as a firewood gatherer for miners in Nevada and California. And at one point he went out kind of prospecting, sort of looking for firewood more than anything, and stumbled upon Teal's Marsh, which is in that Death Valley area, around Nevada, California border, and went down to Teal's Marsh and recognized that there in the dried up playa was all this borax. And borax, was recognized as a useful mineral in washing clothes as kind of a bleaching agent. And so he staked a claim to Teal's Marsh and began...
Accidental borax.
That's right.
The best kind.
And he
was going out looking for firewood. He was afraid he might find a lorax, but luckily...
Instead, he found
borax.
Borax. Right. If you were looking for firewood and found a lorax, what a drag.
He would give you a lecture.
So much boring
I
talk.
speak for the trees.
Such a wiener.
Omnibus is anti-lorax, apparently. Pro-once-lur podcast.
We are Sneetches with stars on our bellies.
We think so.
So Francis and his brother Julius partnered with a couple of brothers, brothers with the last name Story, who didn't really make it that far into the story. And
the ironically named Story brothers, whom we will forget now.
And the Smith brothers and the Story brothers founded the Smith and Story Brothers Borax Company and began to exploit the
SS BBC, sure.
The borax. And they were the ones who, and then gradually the Smith brothers bought out the Story brothers, and then Francis bought out Julius, and it became kind of the Francis Smith Borax Company, Smith Borax Company.
He's the real scheming succession brother.
Yeah.
He wants all the borax.
For a while, it was the Teal's Marsh Borax Company. It went through there's a lot of capitalism in this story. This story is hardly compatible with Marxism.
I can't believe you didn't start this during the Pleistocene when the borax was originally forming.
But it didn't belong to anybody then.
North America was once underwater, Ken.
That's usually what I would do. So Francis Smith starts exploiting borax, and he's the one that, or rather his New York agent is the one that devised the 20 Mule Team brand that described the method of...
Yeah, I'm hazy on this. What do mules have to do with borax?
Well, so these borax producing playa are... at the time, well away from anything, and it may surprise you to learn, still well away from anything, because they're out.
This is Death Valley.
This is Death Valley. These are the hottest, driest, flattest lands with zero features. Lowest.
I'm seeing all of America from high to low, and as a result, I have not been to Death Valley.
So scraping... Oh, is that right? You haven't been to Death Valley?
I have not.
You really are going... Did you go to the top of Mount Rainier and work your way down?
Yeah, I started at the top of Denali. That's where I was born, like Kim Il-sung. And I've been working my way down ever since. No, I lived at sea level my whole life, actually. So
yeah, it's pretty nice.
it's great.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
temperate.
It's not good when you want to go hike in the Rockies, I've found.
Every once in a while, there's a bomb cyclone you have to look out for.
Or a heat dome.
But it was really Francis Borax Smith that popularized the multiplicity of uses of borax. Prior to that...
That's what I would do if I owned a ton of borax. I'd be making up stuff left and right. Ladies, put this on your underarms.
Yeah, if people called you Mr. Borax, that's what you would do. And the 20 Mule Team, they were mining borax out in the desert, and the nearest railway terminal was many miles away, and they would hook up these giant, because it's flat, there's nothing there, that you don't have to climb a hill. They would hook up these giant 30-ton loads in enormous carts, or enormous, what do you call them? Coaches? No, mule carts.
Sure.
But big, 30 tons, and they would hook up 20 mules. If you can imagine, that's 4 and 4 and 4 and 4.
I see.
And another 4.
If you can imagine a fifth 4.
It's a fifth 4 of mules. And this became the brand of borax, the brand of Smith's borax. And it was...
And then the mules are getting it to the station?
They're getting it to the train. And it
which is far away.
Remained very difficult to get borax from, because as the borax mining chased the borax, right? You take all the borax from one place, you go to the next.
Plus, it's just moving. It's a conniving little salt.
It is, and it's
tricky. It's
like
cunning.
mining anything. The mineral tries to get away.
That's why it's so hard to prospect for gold. The gold's like it's floating through the air like spice, trying to get away from Kyle MacLachlan.
Can't catch me. So each time, and ultimately, Smith built a couple of railroads to get to his borax finds because he was a capitalist and he would buy other people's borax claims. People were going in and out of the borax game, and he'd
murder their families.
He was waiting for financial ruin. He would build railroads, and then the borax, the energy, the intensity of borax mining would switch to somewhere else, and he would re-saddle up the 20 mule teams.
Look, if you're Mr. Borax, you cannot diversify.
Back into the reins.
This guy cannot start making,
yes.
mercury thermometers.
He did not start making mercury thermometers.
He's Mr. Borax.
But he did diversify quite a bit. He became, so we were talking in the last episode about the real estate in the Berkeley, Oakland Bay Area and how it was, it was this commodity that invented or that helped Georgism
that helped
form.
It helped give birth to really the first awareness of rampant wealth inequality in the Western states.
Francis Smith converted his borax money into like a Bay Area real estate empire, and was out there.
That's where the smart money was.
That's right. He's out there buying up Bay Area money, sort of in the same era, right? The post-Civil War, like late 19th century.
I mean, 1871 is exactly when Henry George sees land values spike and thinks, I bet there's a book in this.
And I imagine the two probably met because they were in the same zone.
I'm going to write a little one-act play about this.
Francis Smith actually built like public railroads, like commuter rail in East Bay.
Interesting.
And
to increase the value of it. You just said commuter, and Alexa thought you were saying, you know what?
Alexa.
So we can't even say commuter anymore.
Commuter.
This is the new illiberal left. They won't even let you say commuter.
I hope that Bezos enjoys all of these like snippets of omnibus that keep coming across his desk.
It was his mistake that he gets a text every time anyone talks to Alexa. He didn't have to do that. Even if he's in space, he gets a text.
He could have done something else. You're right. Smith gets into the real estate game. He makes and loses a fortune. He builds an enormous mansion in the Bay Area and also goes back east and builds an enormous mansion. He has a private rail car that takes him back and forth.
He has a wife and children made of borax that he makes gentle love to. The wife, not the kids.
His wife couldn't have kids, but she became a champion of orphans, adopting girls and raising them. And then
that's nice.
She
I
died.
like Mrs. Borax.
Yeah, she was nice. She died, but then Mr. Borax in his 60s married her assistant with her blessing, and then they had 4 kids.
Isn't she dead? Did he have a seance to get her blessing?
She said she gave her blessing on her way out.
Hey, honey, if I ever die, I've told my wife this. If I ever die, please marry my assistant.
I believe
please marry my assistant, John Roderick.
She did do that. Oh, I could do worse than Mindy for sure. And so he and his family would go every summer back east to their 1,000-acre mega mansion on Long Island or whatever, Gold Coast there.
Newport,
and then,
wherever it is.
And then they would come back west in the winter to live in. He was a colorful character. And he was the one that made borax a global commodity. In his advertising text, he said, borax can clean cashmere, keep milk and cream sweet as a food additive.
Is that true? You put borax in dairy?
People used borax as a food additive for many years. It prevents diphtheria, lung fever, and kidney trouble. These are his quotes.
He's a snake oil guy now.
Borax ends up over time being used as a water softener, as an acidity regulator in food, as an anti-caking agent, but also...
Oh, right, because it's a strong alkaline. It cuts down on the acidity of the dairy you're processing. Or whatever.
Right. But its anti-alkaline features also make it an effective pesticide against crawling bugs. It's used in toothpaste as an abrasive, but it also features in skin lotions, skin creams.
Borax is great, John.
I know. It's a suntan lotion.
I feel like the mules that brought us that borax should be like...
All 20 of them?
All 20 of them.
And their children?
There should be statues of them in every American town hall.
Imagine a life-size statue of a 20 mule team.
Oh, man. That'd be so great.
That'd be really great, especially if you put it in the Bay Area.
I can't believe we don't have that now, especially given my wife's love of donkeys.
Does she have a love of donkeys?
She does.
Oh.
Not in like a weird Enumclaw way, but like she thinks they're adorable.
She and I have not ever discussed it. We haven't seen each other in a while. I should invite you guys over to dinner, as I've been promising
you
to
keep
do
saying you will.
For 10 years.
Who was president when you first asked us over? We're just going to start showing up.
I think you should. Mindy is such a good person to invite to a party because she will almost certainly bring a casserole and bring me those M&M cookies.
That you got shafted from today.
Yeah. Borax also finds its way into paint and glaze, one of its earliest uses. It's an herbicide against those plants that don't like alkaline borax poured around their roots. Boron itself is used in fiberglass. That's its main use now.
You extract the boron from the borax?
Yeah, you take the boron from the borax, you put it in, you put it with the golden hand.
You take the seed.
Give it to Stan. No, it's an ingredient in fiberglass, but it's also used in polymers. Borosilicate glass is a better grade of glass than potash glass.
I feel like we've just succeeded in making kind of a boring 1950s industrial film about borax.
Yeah.
Gee, Mr. Roderick, I never knew borax was in so much stuff.
The turbo-encabulator takes the borax. It's also a main component in slime, Ken.
Oh, like the Nickelodeon, the GAC stuff?
Yeah, the fun slime.
I feel like when I make it at home, I don't use any kind of alkaline type stuff. Maybe that's what cornstarch does.
Yeah, what are you making slime
Oh, no,
out
wait,
of?
that's GAC. GAC and slime are different. We only use borax-free slime in the Jennings household.
Well, the best slime is made of borax. So Smith falls on hard times. He loses all his money. Then he makes his way back. He loses control of the Pacific Coast Borax Company, which is what it is ultimately called. And then he gets back into the borax game.
You're out and they pull you back into the borax.
He ends up leasing a piece of land in Succow, California. Succow. It's the Succow claim outside of, I guess it's actually in Boron, California, because that part of California, they're really imaginative.
I feel like you don't want to have bore or suck in your name if you're like trying to sell land in Death Valley.
Yeah, Succow claim in Boron, California. And, boron is called boron in imitation of carbon. The ON
right.
Suffix, and maybe it's called boron. What is carbon? Boron. Yeah, I guess I'm pronouncing it right.
And that's why bourbon is called that.
Yeah, because it's, yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a tradition
of drinks.
There's a tradition of all the newly named noble gases being named in imitation of the lightest ones, argon and
right.
That's why krypton and xenon and radon and so forth are all blank on.
Blank on.
Rock on.
Rock on. Rock on. Rock on. Francis Smith ends up buying the lease for the suck-out claim, although he never exploits it. It's suck-out, not suck-out.
Okay. I think you said succow.
Yeah. He buys the claim. He never exploits it in his lifetime, but it becomes later one of the further iterations of the Pacific Coast Borax Company, which is now owned by the Rio Tinto conglomerate. Ends up exploiting the Succow claim, and it became the largest borax mine in the Americas, second largest in the world.
It's a rich borax vein.
It is. It's an open pit mine, largest open pit mine in the America.
No, the open pit, the one out in Copperton, Utah, has got to be bigger, isn't it? Isn't that the biggest open pit?
Maybe it's the
mine?
biggest one in California. It's a really big one. Let's just say it. And
There's no two ways around it, John. This is a big borax mine.
The largest producer of borax in the world is Turkey, but the Rio Tinto borax mine is the second largest producer of borax.
I feel like we need to compete with Turkey. Those guys don't even know what color the Spirit is. Or the Phantom, not the Spirit.
They don't know what color the Phantom is. The Phantom is red. The Spirit is purple. Anyway, some successor of the Pacific Coast Borax Company is out in Death Valley, mining borax.
Minding their own business.
They're pulling borax out in 20 mule teams. At a certain point, they build another railroad. A couple of railroads have been built over time. All of this was going toward the Central Pacific Railroad for a while now. A railroad spur is built to the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe spur that's rolling in somewhere down there, Death Valley-wise. Death Valley is very low. You can't really build a train down the hill.
And if I'm not mistaken, isn't this true that it's only 100 miles away from the highest point in the continental U.S.? Mount Whitney is also there in Inyo County.
It's insane. I have been to Death Valley, and on the way down to Death Valley, we burned up the brakes in the van because it was both very steep and very hot. And then on the way up out of Death Valley, we were driving up this very, very steep mountain, didn't need the brakes. But then on the other side, what we didn't realize is it's down the mountain again.
That's the thing about a mountain range.
And we didn't have any more brakes. And so we really were in super mortal danger.
You literally didn't have brakes?
The brakes heated up. This was at night. They were glowing like embers, like coals, hot coals.
And you just had to coast all the way into
So at a certain
Vegas.
point, and so we stopped at one point and we're pouring, water on the brakes, big steam coming out, no one around because it's the middle of Death Valley in the middle of the night. We saw a UFO, the only time I've really ever seen a UFO outside of Death Valley. We all saw it, but after the fact, immediately after the fact, 30 seconds later, we started trying to describe it to each other, and all four of us saw a completely different thing. If you had interviewed us the next day, we would have said, it was like blind men describing an elephant.
That's almost proof that it's a real UFO because it's something was done to your brains,
right,
by the weird effect of the grays, the alien grays.
It's they
abducted each of you, implanted a different idea of a UFO in your head, and implanted a different glowing bead in your anus, and returned you to the roadside.
The greatest trick the Greys ever pulled.
Was it planting a glowing bead in your anus?
No, it was convincing the 4 long winters at the time that that UFOs looked like, in my case, a giant radio tower that was slowly rotating through the sky.
Oh, it actually had some kind of form. It wasn't just a light.
It had a form and had red lights on it, and they were moving cyclically.
Are the long winters of democracy such that you did not have to? You could come to no agreement on the nature of the UFO, or does the lead singer's opinion on the UFO hold for the rest of the band?
Well, no, it actually taught me a valuable lesson, which is that eyewitness accounts are completely unreliable, even when you're all standing right next to each other watching the same thing. So, no less a personage than Zane Grey, on a tour of the area now in the 1920s.
The great Western novelist.
The great Western novelist wrote an article about what he found in his travels and described the mining camp of Death Valley Junction in unflattering terms.
Most mining camps probably suck.
Yeah, he said that this one sucked. A lot of the borax miners were Chinese.
Oh, so is he racist also?
No, he was saying that their living conditions were not very good.
But the food is fantastic.
If they could,
I had the best Xi'an noodle.
Well, and it was, they were very white because they were bleached with borax and they didn't cake.
Right.
But the contemporary owners of the Pacific Coast Borax Company decided that they were going to build a little model town at Death Valley Junction. And in 1923, they commissioned the architect Alexander McCullough to build a Spanish colonial revival campus that had a 23-room hotel, which is bigger than any hotel in Oregon, even to this day.
I was about to say, to this day.
And it had employee housing. It had hitching posts. It had obviously places to put a 20 mule team.
Why were they pouring money into their workers? That doesn't seem like the kind of thing that companies did back then.
Well, what they were doing, you're absolutely right. What they were doing was they had built a railroad to very close to Death Valley Junction, called the Tonopah and Tidewater Railroad, that was, making the 20 mule teams obsolete. They were going to ship all this stuff out, and borax was still a big, big business. It had become a kind of, a cure-all, a miracle component. And so the borax game, the trading of borax companies, the competition between borax kings,
game, we call it.
The railroad not only brought the borax to market, but it also brought investors, and
they wanted to build a town here.
Yeah, rich, fancy people would come out to see the borax operation, and
I would
put their money down at put their borax crystals down. So they built a theater there, both to entertain the workers and also a kind of, it was a vaudeville theater.
What's the era of this? When was this built?
1920s. Okay. The town was built between 23 and 25.
It kind of reminds me of the big opera houses that are appearing in the Brazilian jungle in the past omnibus entry about rubber barons.
Yeah, it was the style of the time.
Shakespeare and Tombstone, as they would say in a John Ford movie.
Shakespeare and Tombstone, or in this case, Laurel and Hardy in Death Valley Junction. So the town had a brief flourish, but the borax game moved on to richer deposits down the road, and very quickly Death Valley Junction became a kind of dilapidated place. It had a few other, they discovered silver somewhere, and all of a sudden the town kind of...
So this is why you never build nice stuff for your workers.
Yeah.
As Milton Friedman said.
At its peak, it had a population of roughly 350, except at the time they didn't count all the Chinese workers, because who could get around to counting all the workers?
350 white settlers.
Yeah, and so many, and
20 mules.
Other Chinese people standing around doing the work. But by World War II, the town of Death Valley Junction had become a ghost town. The tracks of the Tonopah and Tidewater Railroad were pulled up in their entirety and shipped to Egypt.
Whoa!
And then reinstalled as a railroad to fight the Nazis.
Probably powered by mummy powder.
Well, powered by more than 20 mules. They probably had locomotives. They shipped the whole damn thing.
They had 20 camel teams.
This is what actually there was a legend that before the 20 mules, in the very early days of the borax game, they actually shipped it via camel, but I don't think that stands up to scrutiny.
I think we will do a show at some point about the attempt to introduce camels to the American West. But we
shouldn't just do a show about it. You and I should combine our wealth into one pool that we both share equally, and then
buy a herd of camels.
Buy a herd of camels and bring them to America. And then
have we learned nothing from Pablo Escobar?
No, this is the thing. We use them. We use them at Burning Man every year. We rent them out at like $1,000 an hour, and all those Burning Man girls will Instagram them, and we'll be rich. I mean, you're already rich, but I'll be rich.
But there's camel rich, and there's Jeopardy rich, and then there's camel rich. Like I have always dreamed of being camel rich.
Well, after the war, they did not bring the Tidewater Railroad back, and the town fell on hard times.
Even harder times.
Hard. Well, there are so many ghost towns in Nevada. Although when I was recently in Nevada, I searched for ghost towns and found just those ghost towns in Nevada that you drive up and it's like, oh, there are some stones on the ground or some bricks where there once was a town. Like, I want a proper ghost town. I was in the wrong part of
You
Nevada.
want dilapidated wooden facades.
But this town was built in the Spanish colonial revival style, so it was stucco. It looked, like an old West town, kind of even then self-consciously, like a movie set almost. So fast forward about 40 years, the town is, a little. Well, it's completely falling apart, and let's not fast forward. Let's stay right in 1923 when the town was built. across our great nation in Greenwich Village, a little girl by the name of Martha Beckett was born, and she was a talented and creative little girl.
This is a stunning narrative choice, by the way.
Thank you.
To suddenly switch to the village.
We're in Greenwich Village. Set the scene. A beautiful little girl, Martha Beckett.
Ringlets in her hair.
She was kind of a very artistic girl. She got into ballet at the what would be considered the late age of 14, but became a talented dancer enough that she became part of the Radio City Corps d'Esprit.
She was actually in the ballet company of whatever the New York City Ballet was.
Well, she was part of the Radio City. She wasn't a Rockette. She wasn't a Rockette, but she was part of the Radio City dance corps.
She's one of the pit crews that attends to the Rockettes when they come off stage.
Give them a little squirt of water.
Getting the tires off.
Yeah, rotate her tires. And then she became she was in the Broadway productions of Showboat. She was in A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. She had a career on Broadway. And then moved out.
Tree Grows in Brooklyn is not a musical, by the way. She was doing it all.
Yeah, she was a
singer, dancer, actor,
and
triple threat,
and painter. She was an artist with a multitude of talents. After her Broadway career, after she got aged out of her Broadway career, she married her manager, a man by the name of Tom Williams, and the two of them set off across America. She was doing one-woman shows in the 1960s, kind of in her late 30s and into her 40s, traveling around and doing these performances, little spoken word, some dance, and made a go of it. Kind of ballet, classical ballet, and she wasn't doing modern dance, but also sort of a vaudevillian show that she did in little theaters. And she and Tom moved out to California, were living in San Francisco, traveling around, and they were getting pretty tired of the life. And by the late 60s, the times had changed. People were looking for more black leotard style dance, more jazz hands. They were looking for hippie spoken word stuff, and her style of ballet was falling out of fashion. She and Tom were out on tour, and in between gigs, they thought they'd do a little camping. They were pulling a trailer. Mm-hmm. They thought they'd do, and this was, kind of...
Hope their brakes don't go out.
Her gig.
They might see a UFO.
Their brakes did not go out, but they did get a flat tire.
Mm.
They got a flat tire in the middle of Death Valley, and they limped to Death Valley Junction, where Tom set about fixing the tire. And Martha, who had by this point changed her name to Marta Beckett, she kept her maiden name, she kind of wandered around the dilapidated ruins of Death Valley Junction, peeping in windows, as you do. And she went over to the theater, which was then called the Corkhill Hall, and she peeked in the windows, and then she went around back and peeked in through a hole in, like literally a hole in the fence or a hole in the door. And she saw inside this very quaint little Victorian era or, 1920s era theater.
What a cool thing to find in the middle of Death Valley.
Yeah. Laying in ruins, kind of. The ceiling had collapsed, the weather had gotten in, the stage was buckled, the room was in poor shape.
But her little artist's heart begins to beat.
100%.
I see.
She described it later as having been just absolutely struck by lightning. She believed from that moment, in that moment, she said, this theater is my future. And she convinced Tom, you can imagine her running back to the flat tire and saying, tire, I found my purpose. Oh, and also Tom. And he comes back and takes a look at the theater and agrees that this is a perfect little venue and what a beautiful thing. And he also feels the spirit. It's the spirit of Corkhill Hall calling out to them. And so they wander around until they find someone who directs them to someone else in Nevada over the border who agrees to rent the theater to them for $45 a month or something. And they secure the lease and immediately begin They go back to San Francisco. They, pack up all their stuff and immediately come out and start restoring the theater. It needs a lot of work, but they rebuild the stage. They make stage lights out of coffee cans. It's a real mom and pop operation. At this point, Marta is 43 years old. This is 1967.
But she's trying to recapture the excitement of her youth on the stage.
That's right. And they fix up we'll
put on the show right here.
Well, we're going to put on a show. And she renames it the Amargosa Opera House. And the word Amargosa means bitter in Spanish.
Yeah, bitterness.
And it's a reference to the region, the Amargosa Desert there. And she begins to put on shows for
whom? There's nobody for miles around.
That's the thing.
Is it an audience full of coyotes and kangaroo rats?
There's a service station. There are little adobe kind of. There's children, not very many people. And as we'll see, well, we won't see in the future because I'll tell you about it right now.
The very immediate future.
In 1970, a crew from National Geographic is passing through Death Valley on their way to take pictures of some naked lizard somewhere.
And not one of the clothed ones in other parts of California.
They pull up in front of the Amargosa Opera House and hear music and go over and look through the door, maybe even the same hole in the door, and they see Marta Beckett dancing ballet to an audience of no one. And they go, wow.
I mean, that's when you'd be convinced that you were, you'd crossed into some David Lynchian surreal world, right?
They are really into this, right? Because she's very beautiful and she's a wonderful dancer.
But the show must go on even when they don't sell a single ticket. She's still up there, huh?
And what Marta had done was realize that, she was also a painter, and a painter that had, that was quite gifted. And in fact, she'd explored before she went on her vaudeville tour, she'd explored a living as a painter, and her debut in a New York art gallery where they had they had all of her paintings, and this was going to be her big moment on the New York art scene, coincided with the day of the JFK assassination. So it was just like all those bands that put out a record on 9/11/2001.
At least she has an alibi. They know she didn't do it.
But she'd put a lot of her hopes and dreams into her art career, and so here she was at her Amargosa Opera House, and she began to paint murals on the walls, and she decided that she was going to paint the murals in the style of a 16th century Spanish court. And so the theater had all these alcoves and a balcony, and she spent several years painting an audience in the form of a 16th century Spanish court, a king and a queen, a jester, some knights, bullfighters, monks and nuns.
And wait, does she Norma Desmond out and think she has to actually perform for these people?
So she's performing for her imaginary audience. Oh. It's painted in this wonderful sort of trompe-l'oeil style. It's there are vines hanging down. I mean, it's really like the type of thing that now you might see in an Italian restaurant. But
this is the first macaroni grill. She invented it
at the time. Really, kind of and it's a small theater, but kind of an awesome experience. Well,
do people ever come?
Well, so National Geographic writes a little piece about like this amazing situation. This New York ballerina who's out dancing in this abandoned theater. Life magazine follows up with an article, and it suddenly becomes kind of a hot destination. It's not on the way to anywhere. You really have to make a point to go to Death Valley, but this is an era when Las Vegas is booming,
sure.
Los Angeles is booming, and so.
This could be a weekend out.
Yeah, she starts to have famous fans. Isaac Asimov comes.
Of all people.
Of all people.
Maybe you're just going to alphabetically list a bunch of other celebrities, but no, it's just Isaac Asimov.
It's Isaac Asimov. Red Skelton.
Every night, Isaac Asimov is there.
Brigitte Bardot.
Pinching the dancers.
Chuck Close. They all come. And she becomes a kind of like a celebrity of like California weird. And her shows become sort of popular, like in a pre-Atlas Obscura world.
Yeah.
Sort of, it's like that phone booth out in the middle of nowhere in Death Valley. Maybe I should save that for an omnibus episode. The mystery phone booth. It's like the pop machine on Capitol Hill. Who owns this pop machine?
Which is not there anymore.
Why is it still here for years? Ugh, I'll do an omnibus on that when I get back to my Seattle.
I think it was
omnibuses.
I think it was the locksmith shop.
So she performs on a regular schedule. You think the locksmith shop owned that pop machine?
I think they knew what was doing. I think they knew what was going on.
But they never copped to it.
They never did.
I was in there all the time.
They never did. Well, how much time do you spend at locksmiths?
Quite a bit, actually.
Hey guys, what's up? Hey John. It's like your Cheers.
The thing is, I'm always like rescuing little safes from burned down houses and trying to get these guys to crack them.
Right. You bring in all their interesting work.
I do. I do. So she continues to perform at Amargosa. In 1983, her husband, Tom Williams, disappears. He leaves her and leaves town.
Oh, unless he later turns up dead in the borax.
Well, what happened was there was a handyman who was responsible. The thing about this town is it's always kind of falling apart. Like Tom and Marta were only able to keep it sort of just on the verge of collapse. And they had a handyman named Tom Willett, whom they called Wilgett.
Tom Williams and Tom Willett?
So Tom Williams leaves. Tom Willett is there pushing a broom. And Marta asks him at some point she sees him do a pirouette or something with his broom. And she suddenly realizes that Tom Willett is actually a naturally gifted comedian. And later she describes him as her soulmate. Tom Willett then...
She replaced her husband with a nearly identically named handyman.
That's right.
That's my number one fear.
Tom
I will never hire a yard guy named Kevin Jensen. Because who knows what could happen.
Who knows? Tom Willett joins her show as her kind of comedic foil. He's a bigger guy, and he wears a tutu, but he calls it a 4-2. He's
I love that joke.
He lolls.
It's a six head.
And he then becomes like an integral part of her show. He also is the handyman and her soulmate.
He's servicing the theater and the theater owner.
We never know. Marta never.
She remains inscrutable in her black leotard.
She's super inscrutable. She continues to perform at the Amargosa Opera House for 40 years. Wow. And continued to perform until 2012, when at the age of 88 she stopped putting on shows.
I always hate it when these kind of stories end that recently, because I'm like, you know what, I could have gone.
And I heard about this from a friend on a recent motorcycle trip. He was like, "Oh, you've never been to the Amargosa Opera House?" And I was like, "No." He said, "I thought you were on tour across America all the time." And I was like, "I was." "When did you go to Death Valley?" "I was in Death Valley in 2007. He was like, "Oh, dude, you missed your chance. You drove," and we did. We drove right by Death Valley Junction, and there might have been a show that night, but we were out hunting UFOs with our burning brakes.
You can't do everything.
Womp womp. At some point in the in the early 80s, a little girl by the name of Jenna McClinton went to see Marta Beckett's show at the age of 6. She was in the audience, and seeing her ballet show in this little theater inspired her, and Jenna McClinton became a featured dancer in the Oakland Ballet, and was a ballet dancer for 20 years. And in 2015, she ventured out and Beckett was still there. She wasn't dancing anymore, but she had a protege by the name of Hilda Vasquez that she'd been, as a teen, she'd been teaching le dance.
The dance.
Jenna McClinton came out and said, "I just wanted you to know that watching your show inspired me to become a dancer. And Marta Beckett, who seems to be someone who finds soulmates and abandoned theaters on a fairly regular basis, she and Jenna become fast friends, and Jenna McClintock comes out and puts on a series of dance performances there at the Amargosa. She forms her own dance troupe called the Teatro El Grande, and they start doing a tent tour of the American West, doing ballet, and she continues to do shows.
Also at kind of odd rural places?
Yeah, yeah. Inspired by. So Marta dies in 2017.
She must have been
92 years old.
Wow.
And the Amargosa became a nonprofit at a certain point in the 1970s. It continues to operate as a nonprofit, and they continue to put on shows, and you can go there and stay at the hotel. They've refurbished the hotel, and book a night's entertainment at the theater, which still has Marta's murals throughout, and throughout the lobby. And
are they good?
She continued to paint.
I'm looking at pictures now.
She spent 2 years painting clouds on the ceiling.
I said it sounded like a surreal kind of David Lynchian. Oh, the murals are good.
Yeah, they are.
They're
cool.
They could be straight out of like a cute stylized children's book. I mentioned what a surreal kind of David Lynchian find this must be. In fact, David Lynch must have agreed because he shot part of Lost Highway there. The creepy hotel in Lost Highway is in fact the Amargosa Opera House.
There you go. In 2000, there was a documentary made, Amargosa, and it features all of these exciting stories and more. So you should, if the story intrigues you, you should go watch it. As a denouement of the story, it should be noted into the omnibus that in 2010, the EU and the UK, which at the time still shared a culture, a one world government,
pre-Brexit dream,
decided that boron and borax were dangerous chemicals because if you fed large quantities of them to rats, or if you breathed them into your lungs as a borax miner, they caused sneezes.
Well, surely that would be a problem if they were in fiberglass or milk.
You probably shouldn't put borax in your milk. That style of use fell out of favor, but the EU and UK banned them. So they're not, you cannot get them anymore. You have to use a borax substitute.
So we could be speaking to a tyrannical post-borax world here?
Well, it's possible. I mean, the slime-loving borax users of the future.
I'd like to assume our listeners can produce their own slime. And that concludes the Amargosa Opera House. Entry 038.JE1543, certificate number 26351, in the omnibus. Now, speaking of ghost towns, you can look for at Omnibus Project on social media. I'm at Ken Jennings, but I never say anything controversial or fun. John is at John Roderick, and he never says anything. You can email us at theomnibusproject@gmail.com. You can, if you want to send us physical items that are banned in the EU, you can send those to Omnibus Project, P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington 98155. We got an email from Dave. I think he's on the last Addenda show, or maybe an upcoming Addenda show, complaining about your disparagement of Trappist monk beer.
Oh, I knew that there was going to be some small subset of futurelings that were really mad about my take on their craft beer.
Here's a beer joke. They're hopping mad. Dave thinks you were unfair to Trappist beers. Oh. And as a revenge, he knows we don't drink.
So what did he send us?
He sent us
a sign that says, "Up yours."
He sent us Cistercian honey.
Oh.
Delicious monastery creamed honey from the Cistercian nuns of Redwoods Monastery. He emailed me to ask if I had ever, he knows it's a cliche, so he wouldn't send us a fruitcake. And I said, you know what? Nobody has ever actually sent me the fabled awful Christmas fruitcake. And so he sent us a Trappist fruitcake.
Oh.
From the monastery fruitcake from the Trappists of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Is he a monk?
I don't believe so. I believe he's just someone well versed on the delicious Catholic foods of the Western United States.
There is a Benedictine monk who listens to the show.
There is another...
And a Dominican priest.
We have another guy who listens to the show after drinking Benedictine. And we have a Dominican baseball player who listens to the show.
I always feel like if you are a monk, you shouldn't be listening to podcasts. You should be listening to the voice of God. But these are modern times.
No, after Vatican II, there's an approved list of podcasts.
Is there?
Yeah.
I bet Joe Rogan's not.
Well, you know,
on
there's like a Catholic Legion of Decency that tells you like which movies are good for the soul.
Right.
And there aren't any.
Right.
Like once every 6 years, there's a documentary about prairie dogs. It's okay. Or some movie about some heroic Catholic priest building a bridge in Ecuador.
There are fewer and fewer of those movies all the time.
Well, the Pope also keeps a list of podcasts you can listen to.
Well, I'm glad that this omnibus episode is Pope approved.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to enjoy that honey. I don't know where you stand on monastery honey.
He was worried that he should not send us a fruitcake, which, by the way, says it's going to be dark and rich because maybe we are, you and I cannot eat things soaked in 120 proof brandy. Is that in fact true of you?
Full of booze.
Do you not eat things that are soaked in 120 proof brandy?
You know, I keep a little thing of Marsala wine on the kitchen counter to add to chicken when I cook it. Actually, I put a little Marsala in every sauce.
And pour it on your cereal.
And just drink it by the bottle.
Caesar salad. Yeah, and I take a swig when I'm in the middle of making it.
But no, I mean, there's a certain amount of booze in desserts.
I know.
I can handle, and then there's a certain amount that's like...
And you don't want to err on the side of too much booze.
Yeah, I mean, what I don't want is to reacclimate myself to the taste of booze. Or the smell of booze, or the presence of booze.
I'm trying to look at the ingredients to see.
I do have a couple of bottles of booze that I keep in a dark cupboard in the kitchen, just in case John Hodgman comes over and wants a shot of something, but that hasn't happened in recent months.
Well, yeah, you don't want to relapse in alcoholism out of an abundance of courtesy to John Hodgman. What a terrible reason. But
I also have a bag of weed in my house, spoiler alerts, again, because there was some time when Hodgman and Adam Savage were over and they had weed, and then they were headed to the airport and they were like, we can't take it to the airport. And they left the weed in my house.
You need some straight edge nerd friends.
I know, they're nerds, but they're
tired
all
of
like partying.
I'm tired of your stoner nerd friends.
So I've got all these drugs at my house. God, I'm
give exact directions to the place in your house where the weed is to be found.
They're in my Lazy Susan, which maybe that's why she's so lazy.
Well, I guess if you won't eat brandy soaked Trappist fruitcake, more for me.
Oh, you are going to eat it.
Well, for me, it's only a theological issue.
Oh, sure.
Like, I'm not worried about, I'm not going to lose any chip. I mean, I might go to hell, but I'm not going to lose my chip.
Right. You don't think that the power of demon alcohol and weed are going to dislodge you, and you're going to become...
Here's the thing. If it's theology, it's largely an issue of your attitude toward the fruitcake brandy. Right. So as long as I have a super chill attitude toward my brandy,
sure,
it can't possibly disqualify me from any divine favor. Whereas that's probably not true of the 12-step programs.
No, for me, I'm going to end up having to go into some meeting and be like, today is my first day.
I ate a fruitcake.
2 days ago, I had 22 years, but now I'm back at the start.
I feel like it shouldn't take you down to zero if you just have a fruitcake, but maybe it should knock 10 years off of your sober time or something.
You know, I quit drinking in December of 94.
You're coming up on 20.
No more than that, right? 2004, 2014.
Oh, sorry. You're coming up on 30.
Coming up on 30 years sober.
I'm terrible at that.
And I don't seem like a very mentally healthy person after 30 years. And you know why? Because I'm a dry drunk. I don't work the program.
No.
I don't go to meetings.
I think it's because you were, I think you're much more mentally together than you would have been had you continued drinking.
Oh.
and that's the comparison you make. Like, that's where the win is. Thank you, Dave, for sending along these delicious products of monastic
fruits of the
silence and vows.
fruits of the monastery.
Do you think these guys can't talk to each other? They just make fruitcake all day in silence at the fruitcake line?
You're making it sound pretty good, actually.
Here's what the thing says. I shouldn't tempt you, but it's made of the finest dried pineapples, cherries, raisins, walnuts, pecans, and eggs. Lightly sweetened in honey and soaked in 120 proof brandy. And I don't know what your favorite way to age things is, but mine is to a delicious perfection. And that is how this is aged.
The only thing that could make me not want that more is if that label also referenced degree in computer science and professional sports.
Actually, brandy is the last ingredient ahead of sodium benzoate. The only
Is there borax in it?
No, not in the EU. The only thing this has like among the things this has more of than brandy are like natural flavors, salt.
MSG.
This has more salt than brandy.
MSG also. Sodium tetraborate.
No borax. This is a borax-free. Well, I was going to say it's a borax-free podcast, but no, this is the most borax-laden podcast currently on the market. Thank you, Dave. I'm just making your outro longer so that your entries are longer than mine.
No, you are. This could have been. So I think futurelings are aware that you want our episodes to be under an hour, and I consistently push them over an hour. This was going to be an under the hour podcast, and then then
Dave's fruitcake.
Yeah, then you just start talking about fruitcake, and now it just passed the 1 hour mark.
I'm going to release this as a separate standalone episode where I talk about fruitcake, just so that your borax themed show can be a little tighter.
I mean, you gave me the opportunity to name check a bunch of famous friends that leave drugs at my house, which, as you know, is one of my favorite addenda.
Here's an alphabetical list of people who have left drugs at John's house. Isaac Asimov, Bridget Bardot, half the Mythbusters.
Chuck Close.
You're not going to get either of these people in trouble by outing them as people who leave weed at your house.
I mean, weed in Seattle is legal. They're both. I think. Well, I know Adam would happily cop to smoking weed.
I've been to several live events where John Hodgman has told a stoner-friendly story.
There you go. The one where he was stacking rocks in the river.
No, one at a college campus.
Oh, the one where the dad was
the
cool.
dean wants to get high with him or something.
Yeah.
But that's just something he made up after watching a Revenge of the Nerds movie.
Nah, he listens to all my stories and then he just turns them into slightly nerdier versions and gets rich from them. Kind of like you.
He was doing dark sky astronomy once in Death Valley when suddenly he saw a radio antenna whirling overhead. We're
at 1 minute 1 hour 1 minute now. Why not keep going? Why not make it a 118?
I've got a tight 5 about fruitcake. What have I not said? You can find other futurelings who enjoy these boring outros and probably some that hate them on Facebook
They hate the music
or Reddit or Discord. Yeah. Sorry about this irritating music. What's up with that? I like the music. If it just means you don't listen to the outro, you're going to be fine.
Well, except the outro is where we ask them to join our Patreon.
Oh, that's true. Here's what we should do. We should drop the music right now for this part of the outro. Where John's going to beatbox. And I'm going to rap about Patreon. No, I'm not. Is Patreon also named in honor of carbon?
Oh, I bet it is.
Probably.
Boron, Patreon, neon.
It's one of the lighter chemical elements, unless you give generously, in which case it'll become heavier. Please support this bizarrely bloated show about fruitcake and borax by going to patreon.com/omnibusproject right now and seeing all the cool services and amenities available to you.
All the things that Boron can do.
Gee, John, I had no idea borax was so keen.
Futurelings, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come. If the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may have been our final word. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.